We are so excited to have Amanda Rolat, who is the founder of this incredible, brand new vegan dog food. It's not just whole food, plant-based. It's fresh and it's delivered straight to your door. You see the package right there. Take it away, Amanda. How did you come up with this? And what would you say to folks about why to buy it?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I came up with this for my dogs, Bryn and McGruff, and I had recently just lost my dog Harry to cancer and had a bit of a crash learning course in a lot of the problems associated with commercial pet food. I had been feeding him a high quality, expensive kibble. And so that was sort of how I came to decide that I wanted to feed my dogs fresh food. Dogs are suffering from an increase in degenerative diseases that are very similar to what we're seeing in humans. And, there's a correlation to diet. We're seeing increased rates of obesity, and 50% of dogs are overweight. There's been an 80% increase in diabetes in dogs in the last 10 years. 1 in 2 dogs will get cancer, like my dog Harry. And so I really wanted to feed a fresh food diet. I began to wonder whether I should feed my dogs the way that I feed myself, which is a whole food, plant-based diet. We all know that you can be vegan, but eat a highly processed diet. And so I really wanted to feed them fresh foods, whole foods, plant-based if possible. And I didn't know, we all have this carnivorous image of dogs because we're taught to by pet food companies to have a carnivorous image of dogs. So I hired board certified vet nutritionists just to answer some questions and see if this was healthy for dogs. And I was really amazed at what I learned. I learned that there's really no controversy surrounding this, that dogs are omnivores, that the leading allergens in dog food are beef, dairy, and chicken. So oftentimes dogs with allergies are put on vegetarian diets. I learned that, these alternative protein sources that are high quality and consistent compared to animal byproducts are great protein sources. And so when I learned that this could be very healthy for dogs, and then when we formulated this recipe for my dogs, Bryn and McGruff, and when I saw that they loved it, and I felt good feeding them, I wasn't harming the planet, I wasn't harming other animals, I knew how healthy it was, and I just felt like it was a win-win-win. And that's really when I wanted other people to be able to try this for their pets too.
Wow. And here's your promo that we're playing. Yeah. Bramble. Now tell us about the name Bramble. Why Bramble? What does that name mean?
So Bramble is actually the name of the longest living dog that held the Guinness World Record for living the longest. Bramble, the dog, lived to about 25 or 26 years old. And Bramble ate a fresh food vegan diet. So Bramble was actually a dog that lived on, vegan food. And, interestingly enough, it was a fresh vegan diet, which is exactly, the belief in what we're doing at Bramble, the company.
Wow. Well, this is extremely exciting. Let me ask you a couple of questions. One, how do people get this? Where is it? Because this is brand new. I mean, you're hearing breaking news right now. This product has just launched. Yes. And this is a very, very hot topic. There is a lot of interest. You know that Mark Cuban, for example, on Shark Tank, invested in a vegan kibble.
Yes.
Happened to be Wild Earth. Yeah. There's also V-Dog, which is very popular. And there's many, many others. What makes yours distinct? Let's take a look at the ingredient list. And yours is like no other. Not to say the others are bad, but yours fulfills a very specific function. Tell us about that.
Sure. So I was feeding the other pet food companies that you mentioned as well when I was coming up, not the one that I linked to Harry, that was a meat-based kibble. But when I shifted over to this, I was also feeding Wild Earth and VDog, and I really love those companies. And I encourage people to mix that with Bramble if they'd like. Bramble is distinct because it's fresh. So it's a non-processed diet. So, what I was saying earlier is that you can be vegan and you can be eating vegan pizza and you can be eating vegan processed food. And, I think that for the pet food industry, which really trends after the human food industry, the one thing that I couldn't find was the way that I feed myself, which is I really try to focus on non-processed foods, fresh foods, whole foods, gently cooked, minimally cooked, and plant-based. And so whether that means to somebody that you are mostly plant-based or entirely plant-based, the focus at Bramble is on the quality of ingredients, the fresh ingredients, the gentle cooking, frozen, so it's not something that sits with preservatives on shelves. And so there's this fresh category of food and of pet food. And within that category, we are the only one to use 100% plant-based ingredients. Now, obviously, the fresh food category sits at a higher price bracket than the kibble category. So what I always recommend to people is, whether it's for price or convenience, this is great. It's formulated by board certified vet nutritionists. So my dogs eat entirely Bramble. But it's great to mix in with whatever else makes a consumer comfortable. And if that's kibble, and if that's more convenient, or if that's a price point that makes more sense for people, a lot of people feeding kibble are already adding fresh foods to the kibble for this reason. The distinctiveness about Bramble is that when you start to feed half and half, that half fresh food should really be nutritionally complete and balanced, especially if it's plant-based, so that dogs aren't missing anything nutritionally that they really need and that's required for them.
And you have gotten a certification from the AAFCO. What does that mean?
So AFCO sets the regulations for adult maintenance for dogs. And so for a pet food to be formulated to meet the AFCO guidelines, that means that they set the standards for how much protein needs to be in a pet food, and how much moisture, and how much fiber, and how much fat. And so commercial pet foods, the goal is to provide complete and balanced, which means that it is formulated to meet or even exceed. A lot of pet food companies, and Bramble is one of them, exceed the guidelines. AFCO sets the minimum requirements of how much protein, how much fiber, how much fat, et cetera, for the guaranteed nutrient analysis that you see on a label. So what that means is that you can feed, if you like, a diet that is entirely Bramble, and your dog will be getting all of the nutrients and protein that they require.
And what's interesting is you have a quote on your website, which I think is fascinating. Maybe you can explain it a little bit. It says, dogs have nutrient requirements, not ingredient requirements. What does that mean?
That means, and I actually see this quoted by a number of people. The quote is attributed to Dr. Swanson on there. He's one of our Board of Science advisors, but I see this routinely. And what that really means is that there's, there is still quite a bit of disagreement surrounding whether or not dogs need meat. That's often confused because people still, again, believe that dogs are carnivores, and they're not. They are biologically omnivorous. So what you often hear board certified vet nutritionists or animal scientists say is dogs have nutrient requirements, not ingredient requirements. So that speaks to what we were talking about with AFCO, is that dogs need certain nutrients. They need certain vitamins. They need certain minerals. They need certain a certain amount of protein. And because they are biologically omnivorous, dogs are able to derive all of their nutrients from plant sources. That's what being an omnivore means. And so really that distinguishes that a pet food like Wild Earth, like VDog, like Bramble, as long as you're providing all of the nutrients that dogs need, it does not matter whether those nutrients come from plants or animal sources. It doesn't matter what the ingredient is that's providing those nutrients, because dogs have nutrient requirements, not ingredient requirements. And more, oh, sorry.
No. I think what you're saying is absolutely fascinating. I wanted to ask, because we're getting people commenting on Facebook, where do I get this? How do I get this? Tell us a little bit about that. Like, if you want to, this is a brand new product, breaking news here on Jade Unchained. A whole food, plant-based, fresh dog food that is actually delivered right to your door in a box. You see it right there, and there's the ingredients in a bowl, and there's the box. How many servings come at what time? How do people get it? Take us through that.
Sure. So Bramble's delivered direct to consumer, and it's on a subscription basis. So, and we are only in the Northeast right now, but don't worry if you're outside of the Northeast, we are going to be quickly expanding to the rest of the East Coast and parts of the Midwest by September. And then we'll hopefully be on the West Coast early next year. How much is delivered to you really depends on, it's very customized. And so when you go online and you fill out your dog's weight, and you fill out whether you want, we're launching 2 fresh dog food recipes. We're launching the cowbell and the roost. Get it? And so you go and pick your recipes, and then you decide whether or not you want a half or a full subscription. So what we've been talking about is you would choose a full subscription of Bramble. Bramble's complete and balanced if you want to feed all Bramble, which is what my dogs do. They're entirely on Bramble aside from treats and whatnot. But if you want to mix Bramble, again, whether it's for price, or some people probably are not yet comfortable with having a vegan dog. And, it takes some more education and some more research and in order to get people comfortable with it. Or if they want to feed it with other vegan kibbles, if you're going to mix Bramble with something else, you would choose a half subscription. And we have an algorithm that figures out so that you don't have to worry whether or not, based on your dog size and whether or not you want a half or a full subscription, we send you the box with exactly the amount of food to feed your dog, and depending on the size and the subscription. I have 2 very big dogs, so I would be getting a box once a week. Somebody with a really small dog who's only on a half subscription will probably be receiving a box once every 4 to 6 weeks, because Bramble actually ships frozen.
So that's interesting. So when you get it, you put it in the freezer?
You put it in the freezer and you defrost it as you need it. So for me, again, I have 2 very big dogs, so I always have Bramble in the refrigerator because we go through it really quickly. If I had a really small dog and I was getting a month's worth of Bramble at a time, it would probably go in the freezer, and then I would defrost it as needed.
And how long would it last? Like, I'm always worried about, I buy things and I put them in the freezer, and then it's like, when did I put it in there? How long has it been there? But how, in general, how long would it last if you put it in the freezer?
So it lasts up to 6 months in the freezer. And then once once you put it in the refrigerator, and there's a safety seal, once you remove the seal, it lasts 5 to 7 days. But again, it's probably not the kind of thing that you would necessarily forget, because you feed your dog every day. And also it's on a subscription basis. So more is going to come. The other thing I'll point out about Bramble is that it is, it's real whole food sourced from the human supply chain, not from the feed grade pet food supply chain. So what that really means, and I get this from people all the time. People are always texting me or messaging me on Instagram, has any person ever tried it? Yes, all the time. The number one thing I hear from people is, oh, I have to admit, I tried it myself and it was really good. I've eaten Bramble in the very early stages when I was really making this for my dogs before we moved to our manufacturing facility. It's very specific how much, what the quantities of each ingredient are is very specific. So I'd be weighing them out so that they were perfectly portioned out. And then whatever the extras were would go into a bowl for myself. And so we'd all be sitting there with our bowls eating Bramble, me and my 2 dogs.
Oh, that's hysterical. So I guess the one final question I have is, do your dogs like Bramble? Do they lick their plate clean?
Yes, I'm not just saying that. People ask me this all the time. When we were really developing it, the core recipe that was made for Brin and McGruff privately before we decided to turn this into a company was using a protein source that I could buy at the grocery store, not something that I could actually get from a distributor and that we could scale. And so then there were all of these different kinds of proteins and different recipes that we were using, and I would test them on my dogs. And I could tell which ones were going over better than others. And I could tell if they just, really devoured something or didn't really take to something. They love Bramble. The response has been just the most heartwarming and encouraging part of this. The response has really exceeded my expectations. But what I also love is that McGruff, one of my dogs, I hope that saying his name didn't just stir him and get him to start barking. But one of my dogs doesn't like blueberries, and there's blueberries in our roost. And so he licks his bowl and leaves the blueberries. And then I didn't stop putting blueberries in it because Bramble's not customized to that extent. So he started dropping them around the apartment, and I found blueberries in my bed a couple of times. And then I've heard from a couple of other people, like, similar things. My dog eats everything but leaves the peas. And people have sort of asked me, like, well, why didn't you switch out the blueberries or whatnot? And I take that as actually a compliment, because that means that the dogs are really tasting their food and they're really tasting the different ingredients, and they don't get to do that when you feed them kibble. But it's really that they're showing preferences, and therefore their preference to lick the bowl clean and leave the blueberries also just tells me, well, they really, really, really loved everything else and they didn't like the peas and the blueberries. And so, I'll find another way.
Well, guess who does that?
Yes.
Foxy Lady leaves little peas all around her plate. And
she should meet McGruff. Yes, that's exactly what he does. Yes.
He's like, moi? Moi?
Yep.
You, my dear. I can't wait for my dogs, Rico and Foxy Lady, to try Bramble. I can't wait till it comes out to the West Coast.
Thank you.
So you just go to bramble.com, bramblепets.com.
Yes.
Bramble.pets.com and sign up. This is a really, really big deal.
Thank you.
This is an incredible product that the time has come for a whole food, plant-based, fresh, delivered dog food. I can't think of anything more exciting. Check it out, BramblePets.com, and follow Amanda at Bramble Pets on Instagram. This is a breakthrough. Will you come back when
I
you're
would love to. I would love to. Thank you.
Fantastic. So when you say Northeast, you're talking about like New York, New Jersey,
yes,
Connecticut,
from DC up to Maine. Yes.
Oh, from DC to Maine, you're now selling this. Okay, fantastic.
July 14th. Yes.
Starting on July 14th. Okay, this is breaking news for dogs everywhere. Bramble. And go to BramblePets.com. Sign up to get a subscription. Amanda, it was great having you on Jada and Shane. Come back soon.
Thank you so much. It was great being here.